All right. Hello, I'm Brett Starr. I'm the founder and CEO of the Starr Conspiracy. And I am super excited to be joined today by my old friend. He's not old. We've just been friends for a long time. Rob Catalano. We're going to do some introductions here in a moment. But as people are joining us, I just wanted to start with a moment of gratitude. It's our tradition. We share a moment of gratitude. And I am really grateful. I said this earlier, and I just want to emphasize that I'm so grateful for the holidays coming up. Rob, I think you're working on the road right now, and I think we all feel the need for a little break after the year that was 2022. So I'm grateful, that I'm looking forward to spending some time with my family and having some time to reflect. And yeah, super, super grateful for 2023. And I'm drinking a little eggnog today to usher in the holidays. So here's to you, Rob. Here's to everyone out there. Thanks for joining us today. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, cheers. Thanks for having me. I'll jump into the gratitude game. I have a sparkling water here, which is kind of showing, not showing. Big sparkling water fan. And in the spirit of gratitude, you know, good spirit, considering I've been in the awards and recognition space for almost 2 decades, is about family as well. So as Brett mentioned, I'm actually in Scottsdale right now, but I live in Toronto. And getting away from the hustle and bustle and the cold and snow, but feel grateful that I get to go back on Thursday to spend 3 days straight with not only my kind of different sides of the family, but I got married during a pandemic and get to spend, holiday traditions with other families as well. And again, it's just a great feeling to have, people to go back home to and spend days with. I'll probably, be grateful it's over after eating literally for 4 days straight. But that all being said, I think it'll still be really positive.
What year did you get married?
2020.
2020. So is this the first time that y'all are like having family gatherings and stuff like that?
Yeah, pretty much when you think about more than just immediate family. So it's kind of cool and now it's the juggling game, right? All right, which side you go to and how do you plan all that out, and headed to, outside of Canada to visit some of my wife's family as well. So it's great. So very excited and again, grateful for it.
Well, as we were taking account of the year that was 2022, and we've got a real opportunity mindset at Starr Conspiracy. Our purpose is to create abundance. We're always trying to think from an abundance perspective. And at first, it was really hard for me to, because it's been just a tough year. It's been a tough year for a lot of different people and a lot of different companies, a lot of different ways. And that's the most important time to actually find things to be grateful for. And then I remembered, holy cow, in 2022, I did all these things that I haven't done for like a couple of years. Like I got on a plane and I flew to like a whole different state,
Whole state.
Yeah, the whole state. And I got to go to the movies and I got to eat in a restaurant. And, there was a lot of things that we took for granted prior to 2020. And some of those things started to come back in 2022. So there is a lot to be grateful for, despite the fact that, there's a lot of challenges ahead. But thanks for sharing that. I am super excited to be talking to you, of all the people in the world that I would want to share with our audience around having a conversation about what it's like to take advantage of opportunities in a downturn in work tech. It's Rob Catalano. And Rob just has such an interesting story, and one that I want him to tell, because you said you've been in the recognition space for nearly 20 years or over 20 years, or when did you get started?
Yeah, so I guess by introduction, that might help. You asked me to introduce myself, and I just talked about gratitude and family. So maybe I'll introduce myself as well. No worries, my bad. So I head up the strategy and marketing in a company called WorkTango in the HR tech space. I'll get more specific into that. But actually, maybe a good storytelling in terms of when it started, which is almost 20 years ago, not quite yet. But back in '05, I started at a little company called, like, what's now called Achievers, that people know quite well in the space, which was traditionally started in recognition of awards. But I don't know if you know this, Brett, but when I started like my career, I was studied marketing. I was working at a marketing agency. It was about 3 of us, and kind of grew that over a couple of years during my last year's university, and then graduated. And then the company was a lot bigger, and I'd spend a day a week in my client offices. And I'm sitting around in my kind of first year after graduation, and I'm looking around. I'm like, these people are miserable. Like they hate work. What the hell am I? This is what I signed up for. Like to graduate to spend 50 years being miserable. And what really clicked to me right there was two things. One is, as a marketer, you talk about consumer behavior and why people buy things, and all of those components. And I think that was interesting, and obviously why I got into it. But what really resonated with me was, well, why do people provide more discretionary effort at work? Why do they care about tying themselves to an organization, not to a brand? That really clicked to me. But the second thing is, you spend a lot of money from a marketing perspective. You need to provide the ROI and a lot of the data behind it. And I sat there being like, there's probably no data on the employee side of things. So that takes back to 2005, when literally started at what was then called I Love Rewards, that then became Achievers back, I guess almost 20 years ago.
Wow. And I Love Rewards, of course, eventually became Achievers, as you said, and Achievers is one of the best known brands and recognition. How long were you there?
So I was there for almost 11 years. So when it exited in 2015, I was actually out in the UK, and we got acquired, and I kind of wrapped some stuff up there and came home, and in the end of 2015, early 2016.
So, and you started when there were how many employees there?
Oh my gosh, there's a whole pre-story of, like, it was actually called Snap Promotions before it was called I Love Rewards, and there was just a small select group of people, maybe 6 or so, that were part of the new I Love Rewards world. But
Yep.
the whole company was really small at that time, so pretty small and young back then.
Yeah. And then when y'all were acquired, how many people were at Achievers?
I want to say around 250, 300. I don't fully remember exactly where it was. I was also on an island. I went to the UK to run the global operations of the company, and we had a team of maybe 4 people out there. So
Yep.
kind of forgot how many people were sitting in big offices in San Francisco and Toronto. But
Yeah.
it was quite a journey.
And you started in Toronto, and then didn't you spend time in Boston as well, or was it only San Francisco before you went to the UK?
Yeah, San Francisco. So we basically moved about 20 people out there to San Francisco to maintain, the culture
Yeah.
and all the things we built together. I did about 4 or 5 years there, and then the UK for about a year.
Yeah. And something that you said, I want to talk about Achievers. Definitely. I also want to talk about WorkTango, because, WorkTango is a very different organization. It's a very different, kind of moment in recognition, and, kind of the growth of the employee experience space, and what we used to call the employee engagement space. But Achievers was very interesting, because y'all ran as a startup, and then you ran as a venture-backed firm. And then you ran as a very well backed firm after a Sequoia investment. And then you operated under a private equity organization. And so you pretty much, hit for the cycle in terms of like the different ownership structures that, a company can operate under. What were some of the, differences that you saw in terms of when ownership shifted to these different modalities? I mean, we're all familiar with private equity. We're all familiar with, venture-backed organizations. We're all familiar with startups, but I don't think we often think about just how different it is to run a business in those contexts. And we also, really apropos to what we're talking about today, when we approach a moment like we're in now, which I think, do you think we're in a downturn? I hate to say like we're in a downturn, but
It's happening.
yeah, it kind of feels like a little downturny. What are some things that you would point to as being differences in the ascent of Achievers under these different kind of ownership structures? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the first, couple of years there was that kind of scrappy bootstrap type world, but you're limited, right? I just went through with WorkTango, right? You're limited in terms of budget, resources to execute vision at the end of the day. And I think early on, we took kind of an A round, a B round, and obviously that big C round, Sequoia. And I think, it obviously gives you the fuel and the fire you need to grow and get you the resources to execute, whether it's product vision, but an experience for customers' vision. And then I don't say it was that different. I think you focus on, growth, and you
Yeah.
focus on the things you need to get to growth. But I think we were so ground rooted into our passion as an organization and the people that we never lost focus about what we're trying to build internally as well. So I
Yeah.
think we were pretty lucky because we had a pretty established culture from that perspective. But it's just a different game, right? You're dealing with board members, you're dealing with, you know, quarterly reports and stuff that you never wanted to do and probably still don't want to do. And it's just a different journey of more people involved in that process. However, you know, they've obviously changed ownership in the company, so they, you know, they're involved. The one, I guess, correction, Brad, is when we were acquired by Blackhawk. So I actually left before the whole PE world, and I can't even keep track of the changes and achievers since I left. To be honest, I have ownership, but so I really only kind of lived those two when it came to that environment. And once we got acquired, I was kind of already, you know, kind of transitioning out.
Yeah. But you were definitely there. Remind me in the great financial crisis, the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009, 2010-ish. Was that during the Sequoia era, or was that prior to?
So it was basically right around the same time. So think about it, right? We get this capital, we're ready to grow, and then the world starts to, you know, I wouldn't say crumble, but a lot of uncertainty and
The
concern of
financial
what's
world,
going on.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, the financial world. And what's interesting, when I reflect back, there's two things I think about. One was around that time, I remember Salesforce launched some like reward program, and we're like, oh shit, we're in trouble. What's happening? And
Yeah.
nothing really materialized. I guess they weren't in the HR tech space. But
Yeah.
the second was, okay, we raised all this capital. We have a good platform, but we're pretty small and unknown out there. How do we grow? And then clearly people were starting to look at their pocketbooks a little differently than they were in the past. So it was definitely a scary time that we did have capital to deploy when it came to what we wanted growth to be versus what the market was saying we may or may not be able to accomplish.
So if you look back on that time, you know, the economic waters were choppy. Y'all had a lot of capital to deploy. You were in a very established market segment. A lot of the companies that you were competing against were over 100 years old, like literally. You know, there's the big, you know, OC Tanners. WorkHuman was not, you know, back then it was Global Force. It wasn't as large then as it is now, but you know, now it's, you know, definitely a unicorn in terms of valuation. Did you find that your ability to invest in customer experience, to invest in brand, to invest in marketing, in sales and product and customer experience during a downturn became an advantage for you as the market started to pick up based on your more traditional competitors at the time? Not just traditional in the sense of how they delivered service, but also traditional in the sense of how they would respond financially to a downturn. You know, did you feel like you had a little bit of an advantage in that moment?
So I think we had advantage from I think a shifting market. So when you think about, we could have just paused everything and said, let's wait for this all to chill out and figure it out. But we invested in sales and marketing and to basically amplify a message that we thought was differentiated, signal to the market there was something different, and really in every way possible deposition what maybe other, you know, legacy or larger organizations were doing. And again, if we would have just paused and sat on our hands, we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to get that voice out there and amplify it. And the reality too is, you know, when people get into a uncertain stage, sometimes they look at what they're doing today and could it be done differently? Could it be done a different way? And that had, you know, led to a whole stream of different messaging components that would define our success.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were obviously, when it comes to the financial way, let's say we operated versus other organizations, it was quite unique when you think about the rewards and recognition market versus other HR tech. When you think about rewards revenue and margins and deferred revenue components. So I wouldn't say it's really relevant to all the other HR tech organizations when it came to how they had to react. I won't get too deep into it, but if everyone redeemed for rewards tomorrow because they were worried that the rewards are going to go away, companies would go out of business if they were focused on that revenue model. But it gave us a little more flexibility because we were focused on different margin structure when it came to SaaS platforms versus just the rewards world.
Yeah, I want to just double click on this, a little bit because this is such an important theme. And then we've had tons of conversations over the past couple of weeks with legends of work tech like yourself. And it keeps coming back to the same scenario where, things are shifting in the market. There's some kind of, new organizing principle at play. Maybe it's a technology innovation, like going to the cloud, or it's a different way of, viewing the world. We're in one of those moments now where the pandemic has rewired really every layer of society, at work, at home, out there, outside my window. It's just, life has changed a lot. And when this, kind of inflection point occurs of people evaluating the way they've done things in the past, and the world has changed a little bit, and there seems to be, new and different ways to do things. And then that also collides with an economic downturn. Those two things coming together at the same time. I've just heard story after story after story around how that was the defining moment for the innovators who kind of came in and established market leadership, because it really took, both of those things happening at once, like representing a new and different way of doing things, and people evaluating, because of what's going on in the financial markets, or, what's going on in the world or whatever, people evaluating the way that they're doing things and kind of pulling back a little bit and analyzing. And so if you've got this change that's going on in the market, and it meets an economic downturn, and you have the ability to kind of fill the gap with, take control of the narrative with your messaging, and really be out there when other people are pulling back, that's really been a watershed moment for, company after company after company that I've spoken with.
It's interesting. If I think back to back 2007, 2008 time, yes, there was the economic component of it, but the other shift was, hey, companies need to do something different to change their approach to building a great employee experience. Like, that was the first time you would see, hey, employee experience is going to impact customer sat, impact, shareholder value. But what's interesting is that was a narrative that companies were starting to understand. What I think is different now is that shift is actually a bit forced. Like, how do you now build a better workplace in a remote hybrid world that, is kind of thrown upon us? How do you do it when wellness levels are lower than they've ever been with our employees? How do you do it when you're trying to build a more diverse, equitable, inclusive workplace? So it feels a bit more, I want to say not forced, but companies they realize they have to do something different, or they're going to be the next Blockbuster.
Yeah, it's jarring, right? Because, we've been talking about the future of work forever, as if it unfolds slowly over, decade after decade after decade. And then it was just like thrown on our doorstep in 2020. The future of work just arrived overnight. But, what's really interesting is, even, I would just say it's been accelerated. People, were saying in the early days of the pandemic, and, 2020 and the early part of 2021, that the pandemic didn't really change anything. It just accelerated a lot of trends and changes that were already occurring. So I think there is like this velocity component to it that's different than some of the other changes that we've seen. But if you go back to 2001, 2002, 2003, and surely something that, we're experiencing now, when there is a big change, whether it's, forced upon us like it is now, and happens really rapidly, or whether it's because of a slow adaptation to a technology trend like the invention of the internet, which happened in the 80s, right? And then that eventually leads to ASP and software as a service, and, cloud computing and all that stuff. It reorders the market. It creates a fault line that goes right down the middle of the market. And you've got people on one side of the fault line who want to keep everything the way it was. And you've got people on the other side who are innovators, and they want to move the market in a different direction so that they can become leaders and disrupt the other folks. So back in the cloud days, I'm sure people are tired of hearing me tell the story, but back in the cloud days, you had a whole industry, SAP, Oracle, IBM, who were saying, don't go to the cloud. The cloud is scary. They're going to steal your data. Stay on premise, keep all of those big machines in your server rooms, and, all that stuff. And then you had people on the other side, like Salesforce.com, who, founded in 2001, now is the largest employer in San Francisco with the tallest skyscraper. Happened just like that, right? Because they were like, no, come to the cloud. The cloud's amazing. It's wonderful. Come on over here, right? And then you saw all these companies like SAP and Oracle have to come back in after fighting against the change and buy their way back in. So, SAP buys SuccessFactors, Oracle buys Taleo, IBM buys Connexa, on and on and on. There's a lot of that going on right now, right? Where there's this fault line through the through the market, and you have certain leaders saying, because it suits what they sell. Hey, let's get everybody back in the office. Let's go back to the way things were. It's like companies work better when everybody's together. And, it was like when the CEO of WeWork came out and said, you know how to tell when an employee is not engaged when they're not coming into the office. You're like, well, why would the CEO of WeWork say that? Right. Because they're trying to, kind of preserve their, leadership position in a market that may be going away. And then there's a whole, wave of organizations out there like WorkTango who are saying, no, work has changed, and it's changed permanently. And the way that we used to do things, the tools that we used to use, they don't work anymore. And so we need to, kind of lean in to where the world is going. And so, it just seems like there is that same, kind of conversation and division going on that there was when Achievers really broke through during a downturn, because they were able to control the narrative while all these big shifts were going on. I mean, how many of the conversations that y'all are having with buyers right now are, really conversations about trying to pick the direction that the future's going in? Does that make sense?
It's interesting. I'm going to go back to the comment you mentioned about the fault line, and there's some people on either side. I'm amazed that, conversations that I was having 15 years ago, to the same, floor on an event, conference center, are similar, where there's still people on both sides of that fence, right? Asking people what they're doing about, I'm going to call them more must-haves versus nice-to-haves, and versus listening to your employees, or more robust performance management model or recognition rewards. There are some people who are like, we don't do anything, right? And I think we're starting to have some of those conversations, to your question around, well, what's the future look and feel like? It looks and feels like a more robust employee experience. It looks like, building alignment expectations no matter where people sit. So it's aligning all to the major trends we were just talking about, and what they're forcing that shift to be. But the nuance I'm seeing is, I think there's more confidence to execute than there has been in the past. All right. Mm-hmm. Like, what companies were trying to plan for 2 years to move people remote, they're like, hey, we got to do it in 2 weeks. Let's figure it out. And they did it. And now they're like, oh, we can make change. We can leverage technology. We can do things. So the narrative, I think people are more on the leading edge of thinking about change, I think, than they have been, with a bit of that confidence. There's still a lot of companies that are still sitting on the other side of the fault line, kind of tipping their toe in and seeing if it's going to be successful or not. But the other ones are gonna, they're gonna be the laggards compared to the ones that have kind of taken off and investing in this type of stuff at these times.
Yeah. Well, I'm always amazed at, these conversations when, to me, it feels so obvious that we're moving in a certain direction, right? We were at an event together, and I was speaking there, and I think it was the president of SHRM, and Johnny got up on stage and said, hey, look, things are weird right now because the employees have all the power, but that dynamic's going to shift. And I think that there are people, out there who buy into that, who buy into this notion that we have to create a great employee experience right now because the labor market's really tight and there's all this stuff that, is going on, but it's cyclical, it's inevitable. Unemployment's going to go up at some point. Power is going to, flow back to the companies. And then this notion of employee experience is going to become less relevant. And, I don't want to put words in, that speaker's mouth, but that was pretty much the message that I heard, was like, hey, be patient and the companies are going to have power again, and to me, that seems like that's on the other side of the fault line thinking. But that's coming from a professional association in our own, industry. Right. And I'm just curious, like, do you feel like this is a power dynamic that goes back and forth and the employee experience has anything to do with that whatsoever?
My gosh, I hate the concept of war of talent just in general, but like, talent won and they're going to continue to win, and they're winning. And guess what? All the pressures we just talked about in terms of remote work and environments and experiences companies are creating for those people, they're going to have more options than they ever had before, even in a remote environment, versus what they had in the past. So building an employee experience where people can thrive, because we know the data is out there of the influence it has on all the other metrics that you identify. I always say those are inputs, right? No. If you don't have those right, you're not going to get the outputs of great customer sat, great, define however you define success of your company. But that's a reality. I don't think there's a power shift. It's going to continue to lean heavily on the employee side. I mean, at least for the next decade or so. I'm not a truth sayer or fortune balls or anything like that. But I mean, the reality is if companies don't, they're going to miss out on that talent, and we all know what happens when that that takes place.
Well, for years, intuitively, you've gotten the relationship between employee experience and customer experience and shareholder experience, right? Like all three of those things have to work together in balance. It has to be a great experience for everyone. But if you get over rotated towards shareholder experience or customer experience, or even employee experience to the detriment of customers or shareholders, then the whole thing doesn't work. Do you think the world is tuning in and to that and understanding the relationship now more than ever between employee experience, customer experience, and shareholder experience?
I mean, I think they are. I think there's a lot of data that's defining that. I think even just the levels of investment that are happening in HR tech companies are seeing that if we do invest in these types of initiatives or technologies or digitizing what we've done in the past and building great experiences, that's just going to make people more productive at the end of the day. Now, I think if it's done for the not only the reasons for the company growth, and if it's misguided, there's an issue. It's like DE&I, right? Should you be doing it because the business case says you're going to get more productivity, or should it be because it's the right thing to do? But I think that there's more data to support a lot of those decisions. And I personally believe it's the right decision. We spend most of our waking time at work. It should be a great experience. But I think I'm lucky because I get the pleasure of talking to companies that believe in that and want our technology and our platform. Maybe I just avoid the people that are on the other side of that fault line.
Well, I definitely want to move on to WorkTango and talk a little bit about WorkTango, but to put a bow on Achievers, Achievers to me, as I kind of looked at it from the outside, is a company that was really forged during downturns. Like if you go back to when it was originally created, if you go back to the moment of the great financial crisis and kind of the growth period there, it seems that there was always maybe even more than an intuitive grasp of taking a holistic view of customer experience that was a combination of brand and marketing and sales and product and customer success all working together, but placing that customer experience in the context of also what's the employee experience that you're creating for your own people, and what impact does that have on business results or the shareholder experience? Do you view Achievers the same way that Achievers kind of made their biggest moves during, kind of down moments in the market?
Yeah, and I think double down on two important things you'd mentioned is the customer experience and the employee experience, right? I think customer experience was all about building a product that people were going to find value in, right? And you think about, it wasn't just the HR folks, it was the employees, it was every employee in that organization. So there was a mindset from day one, but is also, and then I love Razor, who founded the company, and I steal it all the time, the concept of drinking your own champagne. We can't do that, for our customers if we're not doing that properly internally. And if we fundamentally believe that's the impact and influence, and we see it every day, we got to figure that out internally, right? When it comes to how we create employee experience. So when you tie all those things together, I think those were, that's what defined a really successful organization that continues to be successful, was from that foundation. Well, what's interesting is that you talk about, and I love when you talk about, your focus at Starr Conspiracy in terms of, I can't remember how you phrase it, building positivity for the community or how do you frame it?
Abundance. Yeah.
Abundance.
We create abundance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we created back at Achievers. The vision was, kind of changing the way the world works. Yeah. But it was all focused on hiring folks and focusing on employees that believe that as well. So I think there's something to be said about when we started WorkTango. We said our passion statement. We said we don't want missions because missions end and they're not as relevant. Was to improve work lives, and work in parentheses because most people again spend their time at work. But when you find like-minded people that align to that vision, it's not just your employees, it's your customers that want to align to that vision as well. And one of the biggest compliments I've gotten over the 2 decades of people wanting to work at your organization because you've built that level of internal brand as well, which I thought was really successful for Achievers, that's for sure.
Well, for sure. And, people think I'm crazy and, they're right, but for the wrong reasons. People think I'm crazy used to travel a lot, back in the day. I've probably been in literally thousands of, work tech company offices, and we've worked with over 2,000 work tech companies at the Starr Conspiracy over the last 20 years. And I could walk into an office and I could just feel the culture. And I know it sounds crazy, but I could feel the culture walking into an organization, and it almost always correlated with the future success of that organization. And every time I walked into Achievers, it was just like there was this, aura of excitement and engagement, and like people like were very invested in, the work that they were doing, why they were doing it. And people were like going to lunch together and hanging out. And the offices were always, like put together in a way that like really encouraged collaboration. And, people, we really suffer now from a collaboration deficit, right? But back in those days, even like office design was, y'all were very thoughtful about it in terms of just, getting people together and, driving creativity. And, I'd walk down the street when y'all were in San Francisco, for instance, you were probably surrounded by like 150 or 200 other work tech companies. And I'd walk into some, and like, you could hear like a paperclip drop in there. No one was talking, it felt, beaten down. And sure enough, like a year later, they would, either be out of business or not performing well. So I will say that I experienced that in a very visceral way. And against a big data set of other experiences. And so I think that relationship between, and we've talked about this before over, beers or whatever, that the biggest challenge, if you're running a work tech company, is usually your own employee experience, because your need to create a great employee experience is much higher than other tech companies. Because you're selling this vision out in the marketplace of a great employee experience. And if you're not delivering that, drinking your own champagne, to your point, Razor's point, it's magnified. The gap between people's own experience and, kind of the value proposition that you're putting out in the market is magnified. And while it is pretty obvious for work tech companies, it's something that is true for all companies. This relationship between employee experience and customer experience is just so much more obvious in the context of the industry that we work in. So you moved on from Achievers, and you founded WorkTango. You co-founded WorkTango. And, we're going to have to talk about what WorkTango is today versus, what it was when you founded it. But why did you do that? Of all the things that you could have done, you leave the UK, you're like, I'm going to start a company. And you started an employee listening company, a survey company, employee engagement company, whatever you want to call it. You said, that's the thing that I want to do. Why and how?
Yeah. So, after the Achievers journey, basically was wrapping stuff up at Achievers and trying to figure out what to do, and had a bunch of options, right? Join other companies that were, well funded and kind of pre-revenue, start some stuff from scratch. And there's just a bunch of options presented. And a guy that I worked with for 10 years at Achievers, I even lived with in San Francisco for like 4 years. I saw a lot of that guy, Nader. We were talking about, hey, what's next after this Achievers journey, and all these options were on the table. And one of them was working with him in another organization that he was thinking about. And we kind of sat down and said, listen, like, I had so much fun making an impact on building better workplaces. Like, if I'm doing anything again and from scratch, it's going to be in the HR tech space. We're passionate about it. We like it. We think we understand, the value that can be provided. Remember, this is back in 2014, 15, where there were still a lot of opportunities for technology to amplify what's important or enable companies to do great things. So we sat down and said, all right, let's do this. Best part about this is both of us can't build technology. I'm on the marketing and sales side, and he's on the ops and finance side. We're like, we can't build anything. So let's find a third co-founder. So we found him. And we actually started with 3 MVPs. Like, it was everything from performance management to one-on-one conversations with leaders and employees, as well as employee surveys and listening. But the idea was the leader was at the center of everything. Or how do we make sure we enable leaders to be successful, to drive successful employees and successful leaders, not just successful HR organizations? So we learned quickly, obviously performance management's a bit of a grind and a long sales cycle. We had some really good partnerships early on the employee listening side, but that's really where it all started with. And like I said, like we had a couple of major things that were important. We started out. One was improve work lives. We created the passion statement before anything else, even the company name. The second is we're building a company to build a great company. We're not building to sell it. We're not building to make a buck. We're building it to actually provide value. And I think those were fundamental things that kind of led us through the number of years of kind of grind and growth, I call it.
Yeah. And you mentioned performance management being a grind. Did you ever come to the conclusion or feel at any moment when you were trying to put some of those things together that the way that people were thinking about performance management at that moment or previous to that moment was kind of antithetical to the goals of employee experience. You know what I mean? It's like recognition, pure carrot, right? And the old model of performance management is pure stick.
Yep.
And yet you still need a high performing organization. It's interesting to hear you talk about it because you're talking about one-on-one conversations and performance management as different things, right? And now I think there's a growing recognition, no pun intended, that one-on-one conversations and feedback and coaching and alignment, that is performance management in a much better way than kind of rank and spank, score people on goals that were created in January, in December, and that's going to define their whole trajectory and life. Are they going to get on the promotion path, or oh well, it looks like you got some threes back in 1999. Was that ever kind of a point of creative tension when you were looking at those things together?
So it's kind of interesting, like performance management is just what the market knew in the category. And I think, when you're in MVP stage, you're building stuff that, you're trying to get people to understand, but then learn about it and position it a different way or deposition it and how you go to market. But personally, like the concept performance management, I try and remove from all vernacular. Like I'd rather call it performance development. Like that's what it's about, developing your employees to succeed. And so we didn't get deep into that game enough to go to market with it. But the fundamental belief was if there's a level of alignment that's there, and it had nothing to do with the stack and rank or the appraisal. It was the idea of building alignment and then having conversations to make sure that the alignment happened in a more real-time way, and it's easier to course correct and have the right conversations at the right time. So it was all, to your point, it wasn't about the success of the business, it was the success of the employees, the central part of that conversation.
Yeah, and we're going to get to this, but how fortuitous it was that you end up being acquired by Kazoo, and Kazoo actually has much more of like a conversation based, kind of feedback based approach to performance development, to performance. I won't say the PM word, but you actually ended up through acquisition bringing kind of that original vision back into play. But let's go back to the original WorkTango for a moment. So what year was WorkTango founded?
2015 officially, but I guess we really didn't have product and market until about 2017.
So 2017, and then y'all were growing and growing, and then you were acquired by Kazoo in what year?
This year, April 20. What year are we in? 2022. That one. Yeah. There's a whole pandemic thing that happened there. I can't remember what happened.
Yeah. So almost coming up on a year. And so I want to do a little bit of chalkboard breakdown here. So Kazoo was a performance management company that was formed through Vista Equity, based on the acquisition of You Earned It, which was a recognition company, and High Ground, which was a performance company, right? And so they put those two companies together and rebrand them as Kazoo. And then Kazoo goes looking for the third leg on the stool, which is employee listening. And they do, they do their due diligence and look all around the world. And they find WorkTango, and they purchase you guys. Y'all merge together, and then the whole company rebrands as WorkTango. So Kazoo is now WorkTango, but WorkTango is a much broader, larger organization now with more products. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's basically the Coles. My Canadian is showing. That's the Cliff Notes version. Sorry, we have Coles Notes. You've got Cliff Notes. That is pretty much the story. Yeah, I mean, Kazoo was operating as recognition, rewards, and performance management, looking for that third part of the stool from employee feedback and employee listening perspective, and merged the companies together early this year. But from a go forward, and obviously the reason why we did that is from a differentiator perspective. No one in our mid market can provide three, I'm going to call them full levels of platforms to provide these types of solutions versus maybe a feature or a tool within the competitive market. And then the decision was made to consolidate the whole company in a kind of a more robust employee experience platform into WorkTango as a brand, for a number of reasons. But one, I think a main one is it offers us the opportunity to continue the journey to build great employee experience software, versus Kazoo was touted as more of a recognition reward type look, feel brand. And again, I've been there. Like, I've rebranded I Love Rewards to Achievers back in the day. I think there's some merit in those types of decisions. So obviously challenging, and a lot of moving parts, but I like where we ended up. As you see, I'm wearing the shirt and have the background.
Well, I love it. I think you're one of the best branding minds in the field, and I just think that rebrand was so well executed, and just the reasons behind it, and how it was delivered to market, and the impact that it must be having on the organization right now. Because I'm sure along with that there was some probable, just kind of like soul searching moments around what do we stand for now as these two organizations, built, from three organizations or whatever, are coming together, and we have this opportunity to hit the reset button and say, here are our strengths here are our strengths here, and here are our strengths here. It's true, as you know, I do tons of research around different market segments in work tech, and it's very hard to find a mid-market solution that effectively combines employee listening with performance with recognition. And yet it makes so much sense that that's the way it should be done, that those things should work together in an effective way. Were there, along with the rebrand, were there some just kind of significant changes in positioning or how you were approaching market?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. If you think about both companies independently, I mean, legacy WorkTango was pretty simple. It was employee listening, but focused on action, right? Not only how do you listen and get the data and insights you need to make better people decisions, but it's really focused on enabling leaders with recommended learnings and actions based on that feedback. Versus Kazoo was, again, deep into the recognition reward value in the performance management world. Bringing together the companies into a more robust employee experience platform had huge implications on really everything, even beyond the brand, look and feel, and identity. There was a lot from a messaging perspective to establish, well, what is the value of what we're calling better together, kind of collectively bringing those as two organizations, I guess historically three, the impact and influence that has on the value it provides folks. We're talking about Downturn. I mean, a lot of that messaging and discussion, kind of the second tier to that, is what does that mean to today's organization, which is very different than last year's organization or 2020's organization. So there was definitely a full level reset of value that we established, a messaging framework around it, and then obviously the brand identity to kind of bring it to market.
So aren't we in the, like, whatever you want to call it, the golden triangle that we talked about earlier? There are these big changes going on in the world. We're running up to, an economic downturn, and you're bringing an innovative product to market. Has that entered into your thinking about, the decisions that you're making around customer experience, around brand, marketing, sales, product, and customer success going into 2023?
I mean, it's also, so it's interesting to find yourself back there. It's also weird to find myself back in recognition and rewards after taking a bit of a quick hiatus there. So that's kind of cool to see everything come full circle. So I guess I'm lucky to be able to rely on some of those past experiences. But everything you said is right. I think, it's really being thoughtful around the message in today's workplace and making sure that's resonating. And that workplace, as I mentioned, or as you discussed there, it's not just the economic downturn, it's all the other impacts and influences that the organization is trying to figure out as we go through all this change. So I think it's really, it's one, being able to understand our message from a holistic perspective of the value we provide, but layering on what that means in today's workforce for today's problem. I mean, we're not trying to just solution for, getting through the pandemic or getting through economic uncertainty. It's really, what do you provide as long-standing value? And we have a unique ability to do that with the robustness of what the full experience and the platform can do. But yeah, it is kind of eerie to think about back at it again in a similar breath.
Yeah, but surely you must sense the opportunity, right? I mean, do you see your competitors, pulling back a little bit? It sounds like y'all have a pretty, without going into too much detail, y'all have a pretty robust marketing plan for 2023. There's probably other organizations who are in your competitive field who feel that the more prudent decision would be to really pull back on, brand and marketing, and really hammer down on sales, which is something I see a lot, in downturns, is, people slashing budgets and brand and marketing, and not changing the numbers for sales, and then just really hammering down on sales to hit their numbers. And that can be incredibly disruptive to the customer experience, right? Because a lot of times what it takes to, close a deal in a certain environment where you've also kind of turned down marketing and brand a little bit, leads to a not so great match, between the buyer and the company. And so sales kind of, no fault of theirs, they're doing what the numbers, are telling them to do, throwing a customer over the fence into customer success, and customer success can, become more of like a triage function, simply because there may be nothing wrong with the product, but it's the gap in expectations between what people were exposed to in the sales process versus what they actually got in the product experience. And there's poor customer success left holding the bag, right? Trying to, make everybody happy. And so surely you must see this in some of your competitors that, they are making the same mistakes where you have excelled in the past, where they're pulling back, and while y'all are getting more aggressive, while y'all are meeting this moment of, economic uncertainty with an innovative product during a big change in the world, and you're kind of doubling down, on taking control of the narrative out in the marketplace. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's, what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, so to a couple of points there. One is, a lot of organizations are kind of peeling back and saying, let's kind of wait this out and see what happens. And we're investing in growth, right? There's a lot of confidence in the value we provide to 1,000+ customers, and we have those case studies. And again, I've been through it enough to know before that when organizations are in these type of environments, there is value in what we provide. There's value in consolidating reward spends. There's value in making sure that you're retaining employees. It's way more expensive to lose and rehire those folks, let alone the cost dollar-wise, but the intellectual capacity you lose in the relationships and the connections that are so important in this hybrid world. So the double down is there when it comes to investing in growth. And I think what I'm really, to your earlier point, what I'm proud of actually what we've done in a short period of time. I mean, this only happened earlier in the year, was that we had the ability.
That shocked me when you said April of 2022. Like, because it feels like 2 or 3 years already with just how much change has occurred. But go on.
Yeah, but like laying back and saying, okay, anyone's been through an acquisition. We know there's a lot of moving parts, but the reality of establishing that value at the employee level, establishing what that means to a customer experience level and our go-to-market. I mean, these effectively, we had an opportunity to redefine all of those, which we have, obviously leaning on the success and learnings from both organizations, but we've really, I think, set some transformational foundational work that will set us up for success moving forward with all the other narratives and messages and things we've been talking about. So I have a lot of confidence that even though the uncertainty is there from a market perspective, or maybe our customers, I've seen it play out where companies want to invest in retaining that current talent. They understand the value they provide. And my hope is we can continue to, I hate the word capitalize, but capitalize on the ability to build better workplaces for organizations, because that's what been pretty shitty over the last couple of years across the board.
Yeah. Well, it's just, capitalize is not the wrong word, but it's just taking advantage of the opportunities and seeing things with an opportunity perspective instead of a issues-based or problem perspective. I have to give a shout out, to Vista Equity here, because look, the Starr Conspiracy audience, my audience, knows that I'm not a big fan of private equity, for a lot of reasons. But I've come to know Vista pretty well. And there's 2 things that I would say about Vista, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Number one is, we talked earlier at the top of the hour about, kind of the differences in working for a venture-backed company or a private equity company or, a bootstrap company, and, resources versus, whatever, right? And I think that Vista does a really good job of bringing a different type of resource to the table, in addition to capital and, all the wonderful work they do there. But they just have all of these best practices, and, all of just this. They've done a really good job of capturing learns over the years across their portfolio. And they're a very active partner in terms of helping organizations in every aspect of their business, because any company is going to have areas that they know really well and other areas that they don't know very well, and they're very reliant on one person over here, one person over there, and like finance or this or whatever. And Vista can surround that person with 50 people and say, oh, here's everything you should be thinking about from a finance perspective, here's everything you should be thinking about from a marketing perspective, et cetera. So I think they bring tons of resources to the table. And the second thing is, how strange is it to be talking to someone who's working in a company that's backed by private equity, that's talking about outmaneuvering competition with increased marketing spend in 2023? And I think that's something from a private equity perspective that you don't see frequently. And I have to applaud Vista for that as well, because when they see an opportunity, I do think they invest in it and pursue it. Thoughts?
Thoughts, many. Yeah, actually, so we talked about earlier, like I spent a lot of time in bootstrap world, and the one thing I didn't mention was WorkTango was completely bootstrapped through this journey before selling to Kazoo and joining the Vista family. And then I spent a lot of time at Achievers in the VC world and different rounds and growth there. But I have to admit, my first, I guess number of months in the Vista world, a lot of best practices to your point, but I think a respect for the right practices for different industries and go to markets and things that matter there is what I'm starting to learn. But the one thing that really hit me was I'm in my second week, right? I'm just trying to figure stuff out. I go to one of the conferences that are met for Vista executives, and the whole day and even the introduction was all about human potential. Like that was the focus, that was the narrative. I was on a panel 3 months later talking about building great cultures and alignment of employees. And it's just one thing that I'm impressed with is that, well, it's not just, well, how do we do that in general for our executives, but how do we have programs in place to build future leaders and educate and learn and inspire other leaders throughout the different portfolio companies. So that's been pretty cool. And I'm seeing a lot of the influence and impact from there. Like I found great talent, in rebuilding a team at WorkTango through those connections, but also those people have been through some really great learning journeys as well. So, good things to say so far. Who knows? Maybe I get beat up on the next board meeting. We'll see. But well, for now, I think we're good.
You've got a pretty good board. They're not going to be much. I'm curious, what has changed? What's one thing that you can point to from a marketing perspective as you go into this downturn, or you've been in this downturn? From the last downturn or even 5 years ago, like the marketing game has changed a lot. In my opinion, blocking and tackling is not enough anymore. You used to be able to create a great advantage by just getting the blocking and tackling in place because so many organizations just didn't have it. But now it's kind of like, comes in a nice little box with a bow on it. It's like, okay, here's all your blocking and tackling. You've got your marketing automation system, you got your processes. Everybody's been steeped in how to do that stuff. How are you thinking about marketing going into 2023, not just from the perspective of, hey, we're, in a downturn, it's an opportunity for us, but also just changes that have occurred around what it takes to be successful?
Yeah. So, from a marketing lens, we always talk about, volume, value, velocity, right? Like how do we get the most volume of pipe, and it has to be the value we need to generate that. And obviously moving through the cycle so we can hit our sales world. But based on your question, the first thing that popped in my mind is I kind of use, instead of 3 V's, 3 E's. And the idea is marketing, in my mind, is educate, engaging, and inspiring the community that surrounds us. And when I say that community, it's not just our prospects, it's our customers, it's our employees, and it's that kind of complete, again, community that we surround ourselves with. I'll bring up a really good example that just came to mind is back when it was the pandemic. Everyone, like HR people, were just, what do we do, right? There's no book on this. Like we're writing it together and figuring it out. What we did as WorkTango is we actually turned our salespeople into educators. We said we're giving our product away for free, right, to prospects. We were trying to help them provide value and engage, inspire them to get through this change. We used to do a quarterly webinar series that we actually started doing every 2 to 3 weeks. Education on how to deal with remote and hybrid and technology and all the things that they were trying to figure out. We doubled down on our employee side to say, listen, you have complete ability to do whatever you need to do. There's no such thing as days off. There's no such thing as working from the office. You do you, and we'll figure it out. One of our virtues was be 1,000% you. So it's like, be 1,000% you and don't worry about it. But it was the idea where I guess I'm taking the concept of marketing to the rest of the community. But if you think about educating, engaging, and inspiring your prospect base and your customer base, obviously there's growth there and there's cross sells and other stuff that can happen. To me, that's what really marketing is all about, right? But I think you said a long time ago, I remember this, it was like the idea is to build the first early favorite advantage in the mind of a prospect before they even think about your category or your product. And I think if you engage, educate, and inspire them, people get to that mindset from a pure marketing and sales perspective. But I think it's more than that, and it's our duty to bring that to life at all levels of the journey.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think about it in terms of, I think most organizations out there have this connect and convert mindset. It's like connect with a lead, look for purchase intent, try to get your SQL, and then, try to convert them into sales. And there's really no engage motion at all. So I'm very similar to you. I favor a connect, engage, convert, and expand model. So adding, two motions. And you really see it in moments like this, where there are natural ebbs and flows in market conditions and buyer activity, et cetera. And if you are, purely stuck in a connect and convert mindset, first of all, to your point of early favorite vendor, if you connect with someone in, that type of model, a connect and convert model that already has purchase intent, you've probably already lost because they have already engaged with someone else, and they're, out researching to see if, they're making a terrible mistake, or if they, fell in love with the right, vendor first. But in times like these, when the convert function, the sales cycle slowed down for everybody in the fourth quarter, it slowed down for everybody. And you see organizations responding to it in different ways. You see some organizations who are just trying to force it and force the close, and that's damaging their customer experience. And so more than intuitively, you have always had, and WorkTango has, a really clear view of maintaining, the quality of the customer experience, even through times when, that connect, convert, kind of motion isn't, working the way that a lot of people hope it does. So I think again, it's a great opportunity, just like you were talking about with WorkTango 1.0 did during the pandemic. There's an opportunity during the downturn as well to look at brand, marketing, sales, product, customer success as one holistic customer experience, and to make sure that you're not creating breaks in continuity and, giving away all the goodwill that you created in one area because of a tactic in another area that's driving towards, a number on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and without divulging too much, we're just finishing up our strategic planning cycle. That's probably about 5 months in the making. But when you think about what matters and stake in the ground we're putting in terms of what we want to focus on, it's all the things you talked about, right? It's the customer experience, it's the employee experience, it's our product experience that influences and impacts all of those. If we do those right, go to market should get a lot easier. So I think there's a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, in terms of building those experiences and all those moments within them. But I'm super excited for, it was a crazy year of integrating cultures and people and technologies, and the dust is kind of settling. It's just kind of get into the next phase. And I think we're doing the right things. And this is a downturn, we got to keep an eye on it and obviously look at the growth of the business. But, pretty confident in terms of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, 2023, what I'm hearing is watch out for WorkTango. You guys are in pure execution mode. Rob, it's been a real pleasure and honor. I've known you for a long time. I never get tired of talking to you or listening to you. You're always at the top of your game. I look for big things from WorkTango, and I know that everyone out in TV land and radio land has learned a lot today and is super appreciative. So thank you for spending some of your, work not from home time in Scottsdale with us. And what a great conversation. I'm deeply grateful.
My gosh, no, thank you again. Always relish the opportunity to chat, and to you and your team. And we built some really great stuff, great things there as well. And it's always a pleasant experience kind of working with your team. And even the time I was stuck and nowhere to work, and you let me into your office this year, even though you were all out some offsite. I was in Fort Worth, I had nowhere to work, and I sent an email, and all of a sudden I have an office for a day for my whole team. So again, I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully there's some value people garnered from today's discussion.
Oh, of course. And you're always welcome. Come back to our office anytime.
Done.
Take care, Rob. Let's do it again.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.